Now on your GMAT, you will see the word and used many, many times. But sometimes what the GMAT will do in its sentence correction subject-verb agreement questions is give you something that looks very similar to and. For example, as well as, together with, along with, in addition to. These phrases also seem to do the same thing that and was doing. And was giving us that 1 plus 1 kind of situation that we just saw. But what we need to remember is that and is the only word that's going to give you this plus business over here. None of these, as well as, together with, along with, in addition to, none of these is going to give you this addition over here. So none of these will actually do anything to this 1. So it's not going to give you 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. It's just going to give you 1. So we'll just be left with whatever we started out with. So it's not going to add anything to whatever we started out with. Let's take a look at that in a sentence. An operating system as well as a browser. We know that operating system is singular and browser singular. And if there were an and over here, we would be going for the plural in this position. But because there is an as well as, so let's mark that out. The as well as over here does not add anything to what we already have. So we need to visualize it as this. The only thing that we're left with is this noun, an operating system, which we know is singular. So what's going to be the correct verb over here? The correct verb is going to be has. An operating system as well as a browser has been installed. So to put this another way, the sentence is really trying to tell you an operating system has been installed. Just keep in mind though that the as well as is not changing anything. That does not mean that the verb cannot be plural. So let's take a look at this. Firstly, we do have an as well as over here. And we're going to go right ahead and ignore whatever the as well as introduces. So we're going to ignore this portion again and take a look instead at the original noun, two operating systems. Now, two operating systems is definitely plural. So what is the correct verb for this? Two operating systems have been installed on this computer. Let's put that to use in our first full-length sentence correction question. But just before we give you a quick minute or minute and a half to solve this question, let's take a look at the structure of what you're going to see. So you're going to see a sentence. So you will get one full sentence here, and either part of it will be underlined, as in this case, or the entire thing will be underlined. Whenever only part of the sentence is underlined, you can assume that the non-underlined part is absolutely correct. Don't spend any time thinking about any errors in the non-underlined part, but do use any clues in the non-underlined part to help you with the underlined part. And as you go through your sentence correction, you'll quickly realize that this underlined portion is always going to be exactly the same as the first option. Our job, of course, is to pick the correct option out of the 5 options given to us. If we believe that the original option itself is correct, then we'll mark the first option. Otherwise, we'll have to choose one of these 4. Alright, please start. You have 90 seconds to do this. Okay, let's get started. The sentence says, climate change, together with poaching by humans, threatens the survival of many marine species. Biologists studying a sea turtle colony have, for instance, observed that a change in recorded temperatures at many nesting sites are almost always followed by a higher mortality rate among baby sea turtles. Now, to begin with, let's mark all the nouns that we think could match up with verbs. So let's start with climate change. Another noun we're interested in would be biologists. And one more noun could be change. In fact, a change in recorded temperature. So let's mark the entire thing. Now let's mark out the verbs. Climate change does something, so it threatens something. Biologists have observed, but I'll just mark out the have over here. And a change in recorded temperatures and the verb are followed. I'll just mark out the are. Okay, so climate change is singular. So climate change together with poaching by humans. Now, what do we know about together with? Together with is not going to add anything. So we're going to have to depend on climate change. And with climate change, the verb threatens is perfectly fine. So let's mark this as okay. So threatens is fine. Biologists have, and this also looks okay. So biologists is plural, so have is fine. And now we have a phrase over here, change in recorded temperatures, and then we have are. Now this verb has to be fine. Why does it have to be fine? It is in the non-underlined portion of the sentence. So there is no way that this verb is going to be wrong. What is actually happening in the sentence though is that the noun is in the underlined portion. So this whole thing, change in recorded temperatures, they're not really talking about the recorded temperatures. The same way they were not talking about together with poaching by humans. So a change are almost followed. No, we can immediately tell that there is a problem here. So this is incorrect. So a change cannot be are followed by a higher mortality rate. Let's start with the options here. Now we know that the first option is going to be an exact repeat of the underlined portion. And because we were able to identify an error in the underlined portion, we can directly say that the first option is going to be incorrect. So why is the first option incorrect? Because a change cannot be are followed by a higher mortality rate. So this portion of the first option is wrong. Now, as you were going through this question, you might have recognized that these 5 options were very similar in terms of structure. So you might have noticed that the first one starts with threatens, the second one starts with threaten, and as does the third, and the fourth and the fifth give us threatens. Now, because so many of your questions have these options that are so similar to each other, it actually helps if we just look for the differences among the options. So, for example, we just take a small call on threatens versus threaten and use that to remove entire options. And the reason for this is if, for example, we know that threatens is correct and threaten is wrong when combined with climate change, then we can easily remove the second and third options as well without putting in the extra time required to read the rest of the option. So what that does is that helps save a little bit of time. And this is very easy to do as well. All you need to do is scan your options up to down like this, instead of getting into reading the options left to right. So other differences that we found were has, have, has and have, and a change, changes, change and changes. Now for the has-have decision, we know the subject of this verb is biologists. So we'd like to say biologists have and not biologists has. We could have removed the second option for this reason as well, that has is not correct with biologists. But as we've already taken off the second option, let's use has to remove the fourth option. So we don't want to say that biologists has observed. We want to say that biologists have observed. Also, out of change and changes, we had already decided that change is incorrect. So that would give us another reason to remove multiple options over here. So the correct answer to this question is the last one, which is threatens the survival of many marine species. Biologists studying a sea turtle colony have, for instance, observed that changes at many nesting sites are almost always followed. Now, just before we leave this question, let's quickly discuss one more thing that we noticed in this sentence, and that was the word among. And we're going to look at the difference between this word among and the word between on the GMAT. So let's say you're given between and you're given among. Now I know that there really is no between in this question, but just for extra learning that we can take into other questions, let's discuss this. On the GMAT, you must reserve between for exactly two things. So the GMAT will not use between for more than two things. Among should be used for more than two things. So that would be three or more than three things. So another quick point to remember, between, keep it for exactly two things. Among, keep it for more than two things. Now let's get back to the question. Let's recap. The first thing is a quick recap of what we discussed about together with. Don't let together with add on to what you have over here. So ignore the together with portion. That's not going to affect the subject. So make the verb agree with this word over here. The second is pay attention to the non-underlined portion. So the non-underlined portion could also have clues that tell you what to go for in the correct option. And finally, in the options that you are given, before you resort to reading every single option in its entirety, it's probably a better idea to look for the differences, and look for the differences by just looking the options over like this, up to down, rather than left to right. Right, so that was just a little bit of application. Now let's switch back to theory.